Philodendron Esmeraldense needs bright indirect light, temperatures between 60 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, that's about 16 to 29 degrees Celsius. It needs well-draining potting soil such as Aroid soil and fertilization about once a month in spring and summer, and about every other month in autumn and winter when it's not growing that much. It's a climbing philodendron and it has been introduced by Dr. Thomas Croat in 2008. It's a beautiful philodendron. It is not in cultivation really much, but I just definitely love it because it's a climbing philodendron and it got stunning leaves. They get bigger the more it grows. As you can see with my one here, the leaf size is staying almost the same, or it's even getting a little bit smaller, and this is because I'm currently not letting it climb. So a moss pole is highly advised for Philodendron Esmeraldense. But let's go into the care step by step. Let's start with soil. So for philodendron and also monstera plants, a aroid soil is best. What is an aroid soil? It's a soil that is well draining but can keep moisture pretty well. Usually what you use for aroid soil is charcoal, peat moss, things like that, orchid bark, as well as peat and perlite. These are substances that add airiness to the soil and also make sure that it can retain some moisture. So especially peat moss will make sure that it stays moist for an extended time. Because Philodendron Esmeraldense likes moist soil, but not wet and soggy soil, but more about this later on. Light, let's talk about light. In terms of lighting, Philodendron Esmeraldense appreciates bright indirect light. Make sure that you're not getting bright light for your plant, because bright light, although it can almost tolerate and take it, will burn the leaves and scorch the leaves, and you might see like brown and also black patches on the leaves once it got burned. So make sure that you're providing bright indirect light. Usually or always you get bright indirect light when you're putting your plant into an eastern and also western facing window. Put it a little bit away from the window, but not too much, because light is falling off rather quickly. So eastern and western facing windows are perfect. I'm also keeping my Philodendron Esmeraldense under a grow light. This is a great way to make sure you get sufficient light in autumn and winter, but I'm even supporting it in summer because I'm trying to max out the growth potential of this philodendron plant. Temperature. In terms of temperature, a temperature around 60 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit or 16 to 29 degrees Celsius is optimal. Make sure to avoid the extremes, so do not stay in the 60s and also do not stay above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, because that's where your plant is definitely gonna still growing, but it's at its limit in terms of what it can take in terms of temperature. So make sure that you're not in the extremes. Temperature about 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit is probably best. So Philodendron Esmeraldense is a humidity-loving plant. An ideal humidity level is around 60 to 80%. I mean, the higher you can go, the better, because air roots are going to grow quickly at higher humidity levels, and also it can attach better to a moss pole or a trellis or anything you support it with, and this will lead to bigger leaves and also better growth. You can see this stem is really flimsy and finicky with my plant here. That's why, because I didn't provide a moss pole. So high humidity is great. Sometimes I even try to go into the 90s, but you can only achieve that if you're using a grow tent or like an enclosed container or a terrarium. If you can't, it's no showstopper. I mean, even 40 or 50% humidity, you can still grow this plant, but maybe you just do not provide the best possible environment for its growth. Also, what I can highly advise is putting plants really close together, because that way you make sure that the environment humidity is bigger or higher around the plants. Also, you can use a humidifier. I'm using a Levoid humidifier. It works great well, but every other week I have to replace the water tank. It's time consuming to always fill up the water tank, but humidifiers are great to increase the humidity inside a room. Propagation, in terms of propagation, this plant is really easy to propagate. You take a stem cutting, that's the easiest method. You just make sure that you have like a node section right here, or right here is one, and here. You need at least one node to propagate this plant. If you have leaves, it's always better, because then it can produce photosynthesis and the propagation process will be much quicker. I propagate my Philodendron Esmeraldense in sphagnum moss in an enclosed container. This way you have high humidity, you have almost nothing to do for several weeks and months. You just open the lid every week or so for an air exchange. But in terms of watering, every 3 or 4 weeks you maybe need to spray and spritz some additional water to the sphagnum moss to make sure it's slightly moist, but make sure it never is entirely wet, because this way you would get root rot, or if it hasn't roots, you would risk rotting of the cutting. Yeah, I took already many cuttings of this plant. It works perfect. You can certainly also propagate it in pure water, but then you always have the risk of rot, and I saw better root growth in sphagnum moss. Also, you can put it directly back into the soil after cutting it, but then you have the risk of not seeing what's happening. You don't see if roots are emerging or not in the soil. What you can do after 3 or 4 weeks is you can just pull a little bit on the plant, and if there would be any roots that started to grow, you would realize that you can not just pull it out of the soil. That way you could also check whether roots are growing and you are on your right path of propagating this plant. In terms of growth, I think based on my personal experience, it's not a really fast growing plant, about a leaf a month, but as I mentioned, they can get like huge leaves, I think around 19 inches and 3 inches wide once they are mature. So it's really a pleasure to see a new leaf growing, and the leaves have a beautiful green coloring with a like light green midrib here on the leaf. When they're healthy, they really look like a plant should look like, with really dark green leaves. So I really like that. In terms of potting, Philodendron Esmeraldense doesn't like to be pot bound that much, so make sure that there is always some extra soil that is not covered by roots yet. So repot it every year or two, depending on the growth rate, of course, and make sure it doesn't stay root bound or pot bound for an extended period, because you would see it in slower growth mainly, but also in leaves that look distorted and not growing really well. These are all signs that it's time to repot your plant. And of course, if you see roots coming out of your pot. When I talk about pot, there's another thing I wanted to mention. Always make sure that you have drainage holes. You can see it here on my plant. It makes watering just so much easier, because once you're using an airy soil, the water is just flowing through the pot, the potting soil and the pot, and then will get out of the drainage holes really quickly. That's a perfect scenario. Otherwise, if you have no drainage holes, the water might accumulate at the bottom of the pot, and that way you might get root rot with your plant, and from there it's a slippery slope downwards. You can lose your whole plant. Just an anecdote, I had it like multiple times. Of course, I made a lot of mistakes. What you can do is, once you suspect root rot, take the plant out of the pot, take away all the soil, check the roots. They should be compact. If they're soft and mushy and brownish looking, you have to take away all these roots that look like that and feel like that. And then you wash all the roots with water, because root rot can go over to the healthy roots and also destroy them. And then you disinfect the pot, you exchange the potting soil completely, and you put everything back again into the pot. That's how you can treat root rot. And you have to be rather quick, because within 3 or 4 weeks you might lose your whole plant. once you overwatered and you have soggy soil that leads to root rot. Fertilizer, it's an easy topic. I generally fertilize about every 2 weeks and I revert to once a month in autumn and winter. So I fertilize every 2 weeks in spring and summer. This is the main growth phase of Philodendron Esmeraldense, and that works great. I'm using liquid fertilizer because this way I can adjust it to the needs of the plant and know exactly how much fertilizer my plant is getting. I'm using a balanced fertilizer because it's simple, it works great. Definitely could use different NPK values, but it's not needed usually. But mainly it depends on the soil and what nutrients the soil contains of your plant. So if you don't really know, the easiest way is just to use a balanced NPK fertilizer. This is where all values are the same or almost the same number. Let's talk about pests for a second. As always, like I'm having issues with thrips. Also with this plant, I lost one Philodendron Esmeraldense due to thrips or thrips. How do you know that you have thrips? Well, you look at the leaves. Once you see brown spots and also disordered growth, this is where you should look really closely. Thrips are, as an example, are really hard to see. You almost can't see them. They're often like small and blackish, and their larvae are white, but they're very hard to spot. But once you see like rusty patches on your leaves, you almost certainly have thrips and you have to act really fast. What you can do is, what I'm doing is using beneficial nematodes. There's beneficial nematodes that are great for thrips because they fight and also kill the thrips. Yes, great nematodes against thrips are Ambiseus swirski. These are small little insects and they will kill all the thrips and also their larvae. What you can do is also you just spritz your plants with water and a couple of drops of dishwasher soap and also rubbing alcohol. That's a great mix that will kill thrips instantly, but you have to repeat the process for it to really work. Other pests that are on Philodendron Esmeraldense are mealybugs. These are white little insects. You can squish them, you can use a cotton swab with alcohol to get rid of them. They're quite easy to spot and easy to get rid of them, unless there's like a big colony of those, so you have to act fast. Then we also have the spider mites. These are brownish red little insects. They actually are spiders, so they look like spiders. They're really tiny, but these are other insects that infest your Philodendron Esmeraldense. Also with spider mites you can do the same thing. You can spray your plants. You can also use neem oil that applies for all the other pests, and there's certainly also beneficial nematodes that you can use against spider mites. Well, now I'm coming to the end of this video. If you like these kind of videos, please like this video and also subscribe to our Plantophiles channel. We try to keep it up and record as many care videos as possible, because some people prefer to watch videos instead of reading blog articles. But certainly please also check out our blog article about Philodendron Esmeraldense on plantophiles.com. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.